The blood on her knuckles had dried brown by the time Nora Langford dragged the latest bundle of soiled linens down to the river, her body aching with each step as the Arizona sun beat mercilessly upon her broad shoulders. She had been working the riverbank outside Kingman for 3 years now, ever since the consumption took her mother and left her with nothing but a washboard, 2 copper tubs, and the kind of loneliness that settled deep into a woman's bones. The year was 1883, and in a territory where everything seemed to move past the gunfights, the gold rushes, the promises made and broken, Nora had learned to find comfort in the slow, steady rhythm of scrubbing fabric clean. At 24 years old, she carried her weight with a peculiar mixture of shame and defiance. The other women in Kingman whispered when she passed, their eyes sliding over her generous figure with judgment. She pretended not to notice. The men looked through her as if she were made of glass, their gazes seeking the slender saloon girls or the petite daughters of shopkeepers. But Nora had made peace with her solitude, or so she told herself each morning when she woke in the small cabin her father had built before the desert fever claimed him too. The Mohave County landscape stretched harsh and beautiful around her washing spot, where cottonwood trees offered scattered shade, and the river ran cool even in the summer months. She had claimed this bend in the water through sheer persistence, arriving before dawn most days to beat the heat and the competition. Other washerwomen existed in Kingman, but they worked from their homes or took in laundry from the mining camps up north. Nora preferred the river, the isolation, the way the water sang over stones and drowned out the sound of her own thoughts. She was elbow-deep in suds, working a stubborn tobacco stain from a merchant's shirt when she heard the horse approaching. Nora didn't look up immediately. Riders passed along the river road often enough, heading to or from Kingman's main street, and she had learned long ago that acknowledging men on horseback only invited conversation she didn't want. But this rider slowed, then stopped, and she felt the weight of attention on her back like physical pressure. "Excuse me, madam," a voice called, deep and somewhat uncertain. "I was told I might find a laundress working down by the river." Nora straightened slowly, water dripping from her reddened hands. The man sat astride a paint horse, his silhouette dark against the bright sky. As her eyes adjusted, she took in the details. A cowboy, maybe 26 or 27, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that needed cutting. He wore dusty range clothes and a hat with a torn brim, and there was something in his posture that suggested weariness beyond the physical. "You found her," Nora said, her voice rougher than she intended. 3 years of mostly silence had made her unused to conversation. The cowboy dismounted with the easy grace of someone who had spent more time in the saddle than on foot. He reached for a bulging canvas bag tied behind his saddle, and Nora noticed the way his shirt pulled tight across his shoulders, the lean strength in his frame that came from hard work rather than leisure. When he turned fully toward her, she saw his face clearly, strong-jawed, with gray eyes that held an unexpected gentleness, and a mouth that looked like it might smile easily under better circumstances. "Name is Joel Sutherland," he said, approaching the riverbank with his bag of laundry. "I just hired on at the Diamond Creek Ranch, about 10 miles northwest. The foreman said you do washing for some of the hands." Nora wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly conscious of how she must look, her dark hair escaping its bun in wild tendrils, her face flushed from exertion, her dress clinging to her substantial frame with sweat and river spray. "I do," she said simply. "Rates depend on how much you have and how dirty it is." Joel set the bag down at the water's edge, careful not to let it touch the mud. "Been on the trail for near 3 weeks," he admitted. "Everything I own needs washing. I can pay fair." There was no pity in his eyes when he looked at her, no judgment either. Just a straightforward transaction, human to human, and Nora felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. "Let me see what you have." She knelt to open his bag, her dress pulling across her wide hips, and forced herself not to care what he thought. Inside were shirts, trousers, long underwear, handkerchiefs, and socks that had clearly not seen soap in far too long. The smell of horse and sweat and campfire smoke rose from the fabric, but underneath it she detected something else: sage and leather and something indefinably male. $2, she said, naming a price that was fair but not cheap. "Ready in 3 days. That includes mending." Joel asked, pointing to a shirt with a torn sleeve. "Basic mending, yes. If you need buttons replaced or serious repairs, that's extra." He nodded, reaching into his vest pocket for coins. His fingers were calloused and scarred, she noticed, the hands of a man who worked cattle and rope for a living. When he counted the money into her palm, his fingertips barely brushed her skin, but Nora felt the contact like a spark of static electricity. "Appreciate it, madam," Joel said. "I will come back Friday afternoon if that suits you." "I will be here," Nora replied. "I am always here." Something in her tone made him pause, made him look at her more closely. For a moment their eyes met, and Nora saw something flicker in his expression: curiosity, perhaps, or recognition of a fellow solitary soul. But then he was tipping his hat, mounting his horse and riding away in a cloud of dust that turned golden in the late afternoon light. Nora returned to her work, but her rhythm felt disrupted. She found herself thinking about the cowboy's gray eyes, the gentleness in his voice when he called her madam, the way he had looked at her without looking through her. It meant nothing, she told herself sternly. He was just another customer, just another man passing through her life as briefly as water through her fingers. But that night, alone in her cabin with a lantern burning low, she found herself taking extra care with his clothes. She scrubbed each piece thoroughly, working her strongest lye soap into the worst stains, rinsing everything multiple times until the water ran clear. She hung his things on the line she had strung between 2 cottonwoods, where they would catch the morning sun and the clean desert breeze. The next day brought its usual work: sheets from the boarding house, tablecloths from the hotel dining room, personal items from Kingman's few respectable families. Nora worked steadily, her hands moving through familiar motions while her mind wandered. She thought about Joel Sutherland riding out to Diamond Creek Ranch, wondered what his days were like, whether he thought of her at all or had already forgotten the Obese Laundress by the river. She was being foolish, she knew. Men like him, decent men, working men with prospects, did not look twice at women like her. The world had made that clear enough times. But still, as she folded his clean shirts on Thursday evening, running her palms over the sun-warmed fabric, she allowed herself a moment of fantasy. What would it be like to wash a man's clothes not for money but for love? To know that he would return not as a customer but as a husband? To have someone who saw past her body to whatever worth might lie beneath? Friday afternoon arrived with brutal heat, the kind that made the air shimmer and the river look doubly inviting. Nora had bathed in the shallows that morning before dawn, washing her hair with the precious store-bought soap she usually saved for special occasions. She told herself it was just practical cleanliness, nothing to do with Joel Sutherland's expected return, but she knew herself well enough to recognize the lie. She was pressing a tablecloth when she heard the horse. Her heart kicked foolishly against her ribs, and she set down the heavy flat iron before turning. Joel rode up the river path, looking trail-worn but somehow lighter than before, as if the promise of clean clothes had lifted some burden from his shoulders. "Madam," he greeted, dismounting. "I hope I am not too early." "Right on time," Nora said, proud that her voice stayed steady. "Your things are ready." She had wrapped his clean laundry in brown paper tied with string, everything folded precisely and stacked in order. Joel took the bundle with obvious appreciation, running a hand over the neat package before looking up at her with something like wonder. "You even mended more than I asked," he said, having noticed the repaired seam on one of his trousers showing through the paper. "And everything smells like sunshine." Nora felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the weather, just doing the job properly. "Most people just do the job," Joel said quietly. "You did more than that." An awkward silence stretched between them, filled with the sound of the river and the distant cry of a hawk. Nora waited for him to leave, to take his clean clothes and ride back into his life, leaving her to hers. But Joel seemed to be wrestling with something, shifting his weight from foot to foot in a way that suggested uncertainty rather than impatience. "Madam," he said finally, "I do not mean to be forward, but would you tell me your name? Seems only proper, since you will likely be washing my things regular from now on." "Nora," she said, then added, "Nora Langford." "Miss Langford," he repeated, as if testing how it sounded. "That is a fine name. Just Nora is fine." "Then just Joel is fine too," he said, and smiled for the first time. The expression transformed his whole face, lighting up those gray eyes and carving dimples she had not expected. "Though I suppose Miss Langford is more proper, considering we barely know each other." "I know you wear through socks faster than any man I have seen," Nora said, surprising herself with the teasing note in her voice. "And you like peppermint, based on the candy wrapper in your shirt pocket." Joel laughed, a warm sound that seemed to startle the birds from a nearby tree. "Guilty on both counts. And I know you are the most thorough laundress in Mohave County, and you work harder than anyone I have met." The compliment should not have meant so much, but Nora felt it settle somewhere near her heart, a small, warm weight. "Plenty of people work hard," she said, deflecting. "Sure," Joel agreed, "but not many choose to work alone like this, away from everyone. That takes a different kind of strength." He saw too much, this cowboy with the gentle eyes. Nora turned back to her workstation, busying herself with sorting the next load of wash. "Will you be needing service again next week?" "Every week, if that suits you," Joel said. "The ranch work is dirty business." He paused, then added, "Though I confess, I would probably find a reason to ride out here even if I did not need washing done." Nora's hand stilled in the basket of linens. She turned slowly, searching his face for mockery or cruelty, but found only honesty. "Why would you say that?" Joel met her gaze steadily. "Because it gets lonely, working cattle day after day with only the other hands for company, and because there is something peaceful about this place, about the way you have made it yours, and because—" He trailed off, seeming to reconsider his words. "Because—" Nora prompted, her heart hammering. "Because I like talking to you," Joel finished simply. "That is all. I liked it, and I would like to do it again if you would not mind the company once in a while." Every defensive instinct Nora possessed screamed at her to refuse, to protect herself from the inevitable disappointment. Men did not seek out her company for innocent reasons. But something in Joel's expression, in the slight vulnerability of his posture, made her hesitate. Perhaps she was reading too much into simple friendliness. Perhaps he truly was just lonely and found her a convenient audience. But perhaps, whispered a dangerous voice in her head, perhaps he was different. "I do not mind," she said carefully. "The work gets tedious sometimes." Conversation would be welcome. Joel's whole face brightened. "Then I will come back Wednesday, bring another load of washing. Give me an excuse to check in, make sure you are doing all right out here by yourself." "I have been doing all right for 3 years," Nora pointed out, but there was no heat in it. "I do not doubt that," Joel said, gathering his bundle of clean clothes. "But that does not mean you have to keep doing it alone, does it?" He rode away before Nora could formulate a response, leaving her standing by the river with her thoughts in chaos, and her careful solitude suddenly feeling less like protection and more like imprisonment. The days until Wednesday passed with agonizing slowness. Nora worked her usual routine, but found her attention drifting to the river path more often than she cared to admit. She told herself not to hope, not to imagine that Joel's interest was anything more than passing friendliness, but her treacherous heart refused to listen. She found herself taking extra care with her appearance, washing her best dress, even attempting to tame her wild hair into something resembling style. On Tuesday evening, a summer storm rolled in from the west, bringing lightning that split the purple sky and rain that drummed against the cabin roof like cavalry hooves. Nora lay awake listening to the downpour, worrying about whether Joel would still come in bad weather, then chastising herself for caring so much. But when Wednesday dawned clear and crystalline, the desert washed clean and smelling of sage, she could not suppress the flutter of anticipation in her stomach. She was hanging laundry when Joel arrived, right around mid-morning when the sun had burned off the last of the storm's coolness. He carried another bag of washing, but also something else, a basket covered with a checkered cloth. "Morning, Nora," he called, and she noticed he had used her first name without hesitation. "Brought you something." Nora wiped her hands and approached cautiously. "What is it?" Joel uncovered the basket to reveal a loaf of bread, still warm, and a mason jar of what looked like peach preserves. "The ranch cook is a wizard with Dutch ovens," he explained. "I told her about the laundress who does such fine work, and she insisted I bring you some of her bread. Said any woman working as hard as you deserves a decent meal now and then." The gesture was so unexpected, so kind, that Nora felt her throat tighten with emotion. "You did not have to do that." "I know," Joel said, "but I wanted to. Consider it a thank you for the extra mending, and for being willing to tolerate my company." They stood there in the dappled shade of the cottonwoods, the basket between them like a bridge across the space that separated their lives. Nora took the basket carefully, struck by the simple intimacy of sharing food, of being thought about when absent. "Thank you," she managed. "This is very kind. Would you?" Joel hesitated, then pushed forward. "Would you share it with me? I have not had breakfast yet, and it seems wrong to make you eat alone when I brought it." Every rule Nora had made for herself, every wall she had built, said to refuse. But she found herself nodding, gesturing to the flat rocks near the water where she sometimes sat during rare breaks. They settled there, the bread and preserves between them, and for a while they just ate in comfortable silence while the river sang its endless song. "How did you come to do this work?" Joel asked eventually. "If you do not mind my asking." Nora considered how much to share. "My parents died," she said simply. "Mama from consumption, Papa from desert fever. They left me the cabin and enough to get by, but not enough to live on. I needed work that I could do without much capital, and washing was what my mother had taught me. No other family. An aunt in California, but we were never close. She made it clear there was no room for me in her home." Nora tore off a piece of bread, focusing on it rather than Joel's face. "I suppose I could have tried to find a husband, but that was not really an option." "Why not?" The question was gentle, genuinely curious. Nora gestured at herself, at the body that had always felt like a betrayal. "Look at me. Men are not exactly lining up with proposals." She expected Joel to look away, to offer false comfort or awkward silence. Instead, he studied her openly, his gaze traveling over her round face, her substantial frame, before returning to her eyes. "I am looking," he said quietly. "I see a strong woman with clever hands and kind eyes. I see someone who works harder than anyone should have to and does it without complaint. I see someone worth knowing." Nora's breath caught. "You do not know me." "Not yet," Joel agreed. "But I would like to if you will let me." "Why?" The question burst from her with more force than she intended. "Why would you want to know me? I am not pretty. I am not delicate or refined. I am just a fat washerwoman living alone by a river." Joel was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried weight. "My mother was a large woman," he said. "Everyone in our Texas town thought she was nothing special to look at, but my father loved her with everything he had and she him. They had 32 years together before the smallpox took them both, and not once did I hear him speak an unkind word about her appearance. He used to say that beauty was just the bait that got your attention, but character was what made you stay." He picked up a pebble, tossed it into the water. "I have known plenty of pretty women, Nora. Some of them were kind, some were not. But pretty fades, especially out here where the sun and wind wear everything down. I would rather know someone real, someone who has faced hard things and came through still standing." "I am not sure I count as standing," Nora said, attempting humor to cover the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "More like stubbornly refusing to fall down." Joel grinned. "Sometimes that is the same thing." They talked for over an hour, the laundry forgotten. Joel told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to ride and rope from ranch hands who were more family than employees, about losing his parents within days of each other and drifting west, because staying in a house full of ghosts had been unbearable. Nora shared cautious pieces of her own history, the way her father had sung while he worked, her mother's skill with herbs and healing, the terrible loneliness of watching them both fade away. When Joel finally rose to leave, his washing still dirty in its bag, he paused. "Would it be all right if I came back Saturday? Not for laundry, just to visit." Nora should have said no. She should have protected herself from the inevitable hurt when he got bored or came to his senses or met someone more suitable. But the word that came out was yes. Saturday became a fixture in Nora's week. Then Wednesday too. Joel would arrive in the late afternoon when the worst heat had passed, bringing small gifts, wildflowers he had seen on the range, smooth river stones, once a beautiful hawk feather. They would sit by the water and talk, or sometimes just exist in companionable silence while Nora worked, and Joel whittled bits of wood into shapes that slowly resolved into recognizable animals. The other ranch hands must have noticed his regular trips to town, and Nora knew there would be gossip. She waited for Joel to stop coming, to cut ties rather than weather whatever ridicule his friends might dish out. But weeks passed, then a month, and he kept returning with the reliability of the seasons. One sweltering July afternoon, Joel arrived to find Nora struggling with a particularly heavy load of wet canvas from some miner's tent. He was off his horse and helping before she could protest, his strong arms lifting what she had been dragging. Together they wrung out the heavy fabric and hung it across her widest line. "You should not be doing this alone," Joel said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "This is too much for one person." "I manage," Nora replied, defensive. "Managing is not the same as thriving," Joel countered. "When is the last time you took a day off, gave yourself a rest?" Nora could not remember. Every day was work because work meant survival, meant staying in place rather than sliding back into destitution. "I rest when I sleep." "That is not rest, that is just not dying," Joel said bluntly. "Come riding with me tomorrow. It is Sunday. Let the laundry wait one day. I cannot afford to lose a day's work." Joel's jaw set with determination. "Then I will pay you for a day's work, just to get you away from this river for a few hours." "That is ridiculous," Nora protested. "I will not take your money for nothing." "It would not be for nothing. It would be for your company, which I value." Joel stepped closer, and Nora could smell the honest sweat on him, the leather and horse and sunshine. "Please, Nora." "When is the last time you did something just because you wanted to?" The question struck deeper than he knew. Nora could not remember the last time she had done anything purely for pleasure. Her life had narrowed to work and survival, the river and the cabin and the endless cycle of washing. The thought of breaking that routine, of riding out into the desert with Joel just to see what was there, was both terrifying and intoxicating. "I do not have a horse," she said weakly. "My paint is sturdy enough to carry us both, at least for a gentle ride. We will not go far, just enough to see something different." Nora looked at Joel's hopeful face, then out at the river that had been her whole world for so long. Something rebellious stirred in her chest, some long dormant part of herself that wanted more than mere survival. "All right," she heard herself say. "Sunday afternoon, but just for a few hours." Joel's answering smile could have lit the whole Arizona territory. Sunday arrived with typical desert intensity, the sky blue and endless above the rust-colored earth. Nora dressed in her least worn dress, a dark blue calico that was practical rather than pretty, and attempted to braid her unruly hair into something presentable. Her hands shook slightly as she worked, nervous about breaking her routine, about spending extended time with Joel away from the safety of her work. He arrived promptly at noon, leading his paint horse and carrying what looked like saddlebags stuffed full. "I may have asked the cook to pack us some food," he admitted. "Figured if I was stealing you away from your work, I should at least feed you properly." The paint eyed Nora with what she interpreted as equine skepticism. "Are you sure she can carry both of us?" Nora asked, acutely aware of how her weight would burden the animal. "Rosie has carried wounded men twice my size out of bad situations," Joel said confidently. "She will be fine, and we will take it easy on her." Mounting was awkward. Even with Joel's help and a convenient rock for a mounting block, Nora felt graceless and oversized scrambling onto the horse's back. But once she was settled, Joel swung up behind her with easy competence, and she found herself cocooned between his arms as he gathered the reins. The intimacy of the position made her breath catch. She could feel the solid warmth of Joel's chest against her back, the strength of his thighs bracketing hers, the careful way he held the reins so his arms would not jostle her. It was more physical contact than she had experienced in years, and it awakened sensations she had thought long dead. "Comfortable?" Joel asked, his voice close to her ear. Nora could only nod, not trusting her voice. They rode north along the river for a while. Then Joel guided Rosie up a gentle slope toward higher ground. The landscape unfolded around them in shades of gold and rust and green, the desert revealing its hidden beauty to those patient enough to look. Joel pointed out landmarks, a distinctive rock formation that looked like a crouching cat, the distant purple smudge of mountains, the way certain plants clustered near hidden water sources. "I never realized how much there was to see," Nora admitted. "From the river, everything looked the same." "The river keeps you alive," Joel said, "but it also keeps you in one place. Sometimes you have to leave safety behind to see what else is possible." They rode for perhaps an hour, climbing into foothills where juniper and pinyon pine provided scattered shade. Joel found a spot with a sweeping view of the valley below, Kingman just visible as a cluster of buildings in the distance, and there he helped Nora dismount. The saddlebags proved to contain not just food but also a blanket, which Joel spread in the shade of a gnarled juniper. They laid out the feast the ranch cook had prepared: fried chicken, biscuits, pickled vegetables, and even a small apple pie. It was more food than Nora usually ate in 2 days, and seeing it spread out like an offering made her throat tight with emotion. "This is too much," she said. "Your cook will think I am feeding an army." "She knows I'm feeding someone who works too hard and deserves better," Joel replied, settling onto the blanket beside her. "Now eat. I will not have you starving when there is plenty to share." They ate slowly, talking between bites about everything and nothing. Joel shared stories from the ranch: the ornery bull that had chased 3 men up a tree, the mountain lion tracks they had found near the north pasture, the way the summer storms would build over the mountains each afternoon like clockwork. Nora found herself relaxing, laughing at his stories, contributing her own observations about the peculiar people of Kingman and their laundry habits. "You can tell a lot about a person from their washing," she said. "The banker's wife wears her dresses until they practically rot off her, then throws them away rather than mending. But the saloon girls take such good care of their clothes, mending every tiny tear, making their things last." "That says something about value," Joel observed. "The rich take what they have for granted. The people who know struggle appreciate what they have got." "You sound like you have struggled," Nora said carefully. Joel was quiet for a moment, looking out over the valley. "After my parents died, I was 18 with nothing but the family horse and about $20. I worked any job I could find: mucking stables, hauling freight, cowboying for outfits that paid in beans and bacon. Spent 3 years just barely scraping by before I got skilled enough to hire on at decent ranches." He turned to look at her. "I know what it is to work until your hands bleed, Nora. I know what it is to go to bed hungry and wake up wondering if today is the day you will finally break." "But you did not break," Nora said softly. "Neither did you." Joel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, his grip gentle but firm. "That is what I see when I look at you, not your body, not your circumstances. I see someone who refused to break." Nora looked down at their joined hands, hers red and rough from lye soap, his scarred from rope and leather. They were both marked by hard work, by survival, by refusing to surrender to a world that would have been just as happy to grind them under. "Why me?" she whispered. "You could have any of the girls in town. Pretty girls, thin girls, girls who would be easy to court." Joel shifted closer, his free hand coming up to gently tip her chin so she had to meet his eyes. "I do not want easy, Nora. I do not want some girl who has never known hardship, who would wilt the first time things got difficult. I want someone real, someone strong, someone who knows the value of loyalty and hard work because she lives it every day." "You barely know me," Nora protested, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "I know enough," Joel said. "I know you are kind because you do beautiful work even for customers who probably do not appreciate it. I know you are brave because you chose to survive alone rather than compromise yourself. I know you are smart because you have built a life from almost nothing. And I know that when I ride toward the river every week, my heart beats faster, and when I ride away, I am already counting the hours until I can return." "Joel." Nora's voice broke on his name. "I am not asking for anything you are not ready to give," Joel said quickly. "I just need you to know that this is not charity or pity or some passing fancy. I care about you, Nora Langford. I want to know you better, spend more time with you, see where this might lead. If you will let me." Nora had spent so long believing she was unlovable, unwanted, that hearing Joel's words felt like standing in a rainstorm after years of drought. Part of her wanted to throw up every defense to protect herself from inevitable disappointment. But a larger part, The part that had kept her going through loss and loneliness and endless labor recognized truth when it heard it. "I am afraid," she admitted. "I am afraid you will wake up one day and realize you could do better, that you made a mistake." Joel's grip on her hand tightened. "I am afraid too. Afraid you will decide I am not worth the risk, that I am just another man who will disappoint you. But being afraid is not a good enough reason to walk away from something that might be wonderful." He leaned closer, and Nora realized with a jolt that he was going to kiss her. For one panicked moment she considered pulling away, but then his lips met hers, gentle and questioning, and everything else faded away. The kiss was sweet and careful, nothing like the rough demands she had sometimes imagined from men. Joel kissed her like she was precious, like he was grateful for the privilege, and when they finally parted, Nora felt tears tracking down her cheeks. "Why are you crying?" Joel asked, concerned, brushing at her tears with his thumbs. "Because no one has ever been this kind to me," Nora said honestly. "Because I did not know it was possible to feel like this." Joel gathered her into his arms, and Nora let herself lean into his strength, let herself be held for the first time in longer than she could remember. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped together in the shade while the afternoon sun painted the desert in shades of gold. Eventually, they ate the apple pie, feeding each other bites and laughing at the absurd sweetness of it all. Joel told her about his dreams saving enough money to buy his own small ranch someday, running cattle on land that belonged to him, building something that would last. Nora shared her own tentative hopes, maybe expanding her washing business, hiring help, taking on more customers than she could handle alone. "You should not have to work yourself to the bone forever," Joel said seriously. "There should be more to life than just survival." "What else is there?" Nora asked, genuinely curious. "Joy," Joel said simply. "Laughter. Love. Building something together with someone you care about, watching the sunset just because it is beautiful, not because you finally finished the day's work." It sounded like a fantasy, too good to be real. But sitting there in Joel's arms with the taste of apple pie on her tongue and the desert spreading vast and beautiful around them, Nora let herself believe it might be possible. The ride back to her cabin stretched long and sweet, both of them reluctant to let the day end. When Joel finally helped her down from Rosie, the sun was painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple, and the evening star was just visible above the eastern horizon. "Thank you," Nora said, inadequate words for the gift he had given her a day away from work, away from worry, away from the lonely rhythm of her life. "Today was wonderful." "It was just the first," Joel promised. "There will be more if you want them." "I want them," Nora said, surprised by her own certainty. "I want more days like this. I want more time with you." Joel's smile was brilliant in the gathering twilight. He kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, until Nora felt heat pooling in places that had been cold for so long. When they parted, both were breathing hard. "I should go," Joel said reluctantly, "but I will be back Wednesday, earlier this time. Maybe I can help you with some of the heavy work before we talk." "You do not have to, I want to," Joel interrupted firmly. "Let me help you, Nora. Let me be part of your life, not just a visitor to it." After he rode away, Nora stood outside her cabin watching the stars emerge one by one across the darkening sky. Something fundamental had shifted in her universe. She was no longer quite so alone, no longer quite so resigned to a future of endless, solitary labor. Joel Sutherland had ridden into her life with his dirty laundry and his gentle eyes, and somehow, impossibly, he had brought his heart along too. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and wonder. Joel kept his promise, arriving twice a week to help with the heaviest tasks, hauling water, wringing out canvas and blankets, carrying the largest bundles of laundry to and from her cabin. His presence transformed the work from drudgery into something almost pleasant. They talked constantly, learning each other's histories and habits, discovering shared opinions and enjoyable disagreements. The people of Kingman began to notice. Nora intercepted curious looks from some of her customers, heard whispers when she made her rare trips to the general store for soap and supplies. The banker's wife made a pointed comment about cowboys who did not know their proper place, but Nora held her tongue and her dignity, refusing to give gossips the satisfaction of a response. Joel faced his own challenges at the ranch. He mentioned, carefully, that some of the other hands had made jokes about his interest in the river woman, as they called Nora. But Joel had a quiet strength that commanded respect, and when he made it clear that disrespect toward Nora would not be tolerated, the joking stopped. "I told them you are a respectable businesswoman providing a valuable service," Joel said one August afternoon as they sat by the river, watching the water run low in the summer heat. "And that anyone who has a problem with you has a problem with me. You will lose friends over this," Nora warned. "Over me?" "Then they were not friends worth keeping," Joel said simply. He had brought his whittling knife and was working on a piece of juniper, the clean smell of fresh-cut wood mixing with the river's muddy scent. "I am 27 years old, Nora. I have been alone most of my adult life, drifting from place to place, never putting down roots because nothing felt worth staying for. But this," he gestured between them, "this feels worth it. You feel worth it." "What are we doing, Joel?" Nora asked, voicing the question that had been circling in her mind for weeks. "Where is this heading?" Joel set down his whittling and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I am courting you, Nora Langford. Properly courting you, with the intention of making you my wife if you will have me. I know we have not known each other long, but I also know my own heart. I want to build a life with you." The declaration should have terrified her, but instead Nora felt a calm certainty settling into her bones. "I want that too," she said. "But Joel, you need to understand what you would be getting. I am not some delicate flower. I am a large woman who will always be large. I will never fit society's idea of what a cowboy's wife should look like." "Society can go hang," Joel said bluntly. "I am not looking for society's approval. I am looking for a partner, someone strong enough to weather hard times, practical enough to keep a home running, and stubborn enough to put up with a cowboy's long hours and uncertain pay." Despite the seriousness of the conversation, Nora laughed. "I am definitely stubborn enough." "Then we are agreed," Joel said, grinning. "I will court you properly for a decent interval so no one can say we rushed into things, and then I will marry you and we will figure out the rest as we go." "How long is a decent interval?" Nora asked, surprised to find herself impatient. "Fall," Joel suggested. "Give us a few more months to be certain, time for me to save up some more money and make proper arrangements. Then maybe we could marry before winter sets in." 3 months felt like both an eternity and no time at all. But Nora understood the wisdom in waiting, in giving them both time to be absolutely sure. She nodded her agreement, and Joel sealed it with a kiss that started sweet and turned heated, until they broke apart gasping and laughing at their own eagerness. The weeks that followed were the happiest Nora had ever known. Joel courted her openly, bringing her small gifts, taking her on rides into the desert when work allowed, sitting with her by the river and sharing dreams for their future. He talked about buying land, maybe something with a natural spring and good grazing, where they could start small and build up over the years. "You could keep doing laundry if you wanted," Joel said, "though I would rather you did not have to work quite so hard. Maybe we could hire some help, expand into a real business. Or maybe you would want to do something else entirely. Point is, we would be partners. What is mine would be yours, and we would make decisions together. The idea of partnership, of sharing burdens and decisions and life with someone who saw her as an equal, was almost overwhelming. Nora had been alone for so long that she had forgotten what it meant to be part of a team, part of something larger than herself. In September, Joel arranged for Nora to visit Diamond Creek Ranch, wanting her to see where he worked and meet some of the people who populated his daily life. She was nervous about the outing, worried about how the other hands would react to her, but Joel's steady presence gave her courage. The ranch was larger than she had imagined, with a sprawling main house, several outbuildings, and an extensive corral system. Joel introduced her to the foreman, a grizzled man named Dutch who looked her over with shrewd eyes before nodding approval. "Joel says you are tougher than boot leather and twice as useful," Dutch said. "I like a woman with backbone." The ranch cook, a formidable Mexican woman named Carmen, welcomed Nora with warmth and fed them a lunch that could have sustained a small army. "It is about time Joel found someone," Carmen said in heavily accented English, patting Nora's hand. "He has been too serious, too alone. You are good for him, I think." Some of the other hands were friendly, others reserved, but none were openly hostile. Nora realized that Joel had been preparing the ground for her arrival, making sure she would be welcomed rather than scorned. The care he had taken, the thought he had put into protecting her from potential cruelty, made her love him even more. By early October, as the brutal Arizona summer finally began to release its grip, and the nights grew cool, Joel raised the question of timing again. They were sitting by the river at sunset, wrapped in a blanket against the evening chill, when he pulled a small box from his pocket. "I know we said fall, and I am happy to wait longer if you need more time," Joel began, his voice slightly nervous. "But Nora, every day I spend with you makes me more certain that I want to spend every day with you, so I am asking now properly. Will you marry me?" He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small garnet set in it. "It was my grandmother's," he explained. "My mother gave it to me before she died, told me to save it for someone special. I cannot think of anyone more special than you." Nora looked at the ring, then at Joel's hopeful, anxious face and felt her heart swell to bursting. "Yes," she said, the word coming out thick with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." Joel's whoop of joy startled the birds from the cottonwoods. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if meant for her hand, and then he was kissing her, holding her, spinning her around despite her size until they both collapsed laughing onto the blanket. "When?" Joel asked, once they had caught their breath. "How soon can we make this official?" "As soon as we can arrange it," Nora said decisively. Her caution had been worn away by months of Joel's steady devotion. She knew her own heart now, knew that this was right in a way few things in her life had ever been right. "I do not need a big wedding or a fancy dress. I just need you." They decided on a small ceremony in early November, giving them time to make basic arrangements but not dragging things out unnecessarily. Joel would speak to the circuit preacher who visited Kingman monthly, and they would marry in the small church on the edge of town. Carmen and Dutch agreed to stand as witnesses, and a few of the friendlier ranch hands promised to attend. The news spread through Kingman like wildfire. Nora endured stares and whispers, heard all the predictable gossip that Joel must be desperate, that she had trapped him somehow, that the marriage would not last the winter. But she also received unexpected support. The saloon girls, who brought her their washing weekly, clubbed together to give her a length of blue silk for a wedding dress. The general store owner, a kind man who had always treated her fairly, offered to host a small reception in the back room of his establishment. "You have been a fixture of this town for years now," he said when Nora tried to refuse. "Good people want to celebrate with you." The support steadied her, reminded her that not everyone judged worth by appearance, and Joel's unwavering devotion answered any doubts before they could fully form. He was with her constantly in the weeks before the wedding, helping her close out her laundry business properly, packing up her cabin, making arrangements for their life together. Joel had found a small house for rent on the edge of Kingman, closer to the ranch but still near the river, with room for Nora to continue washing if she chose. He had furnished it simply but carefully: a real bed with a proper mattress, a table and chairs, a wood stove for cooking and heat, even curtains for the windows. When he showed it to Nora for the first time, she walked through the rooms in wonder, touching the furniture with reverent hands. "This is really ours?" she asked, still hardly believing it. "Really ours," Joel confirmed. "A place to start our life together. We can fix it up however you like, make it into a real home." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cool, perfect November weather. Nora dressed in the blue silk dress the saloon girls had given her, which Carmen had helped her sew. It was simple but elegant, cut to flatter her figure rather than hide it, and when Nora looked at herself in the small mirror, she hardly recognized the woman staring back. She looked happy, she realized. She looked loved. Carmen had insisted on helping her prepare, braiding flowers into Nora's dark hair and dabbing her wrists and throat with rosewater. "You are beautiful," Carmen said firmly, brooking no argument. "Joel is a lucky man." "I think I am the lucky one," Nora replied. "Then you are both lucky," Carmen said, smiling. "That is how it should be." The church was small and plain, but probably several someones had filled it with desert wildflowers and greenery. Perhaps 20 people filled the pews, more than Nora had expected. She recognized ranch hands from Diamond Creek, several of her regular customers, even the banker's wife looking sour but present. And standing at the front, dressed in his best clothes with his hair freshly cut, and his face shining with joy, was Joel. Nora walked down the short aisle alone, having no family to give her away. But she did not feel alone. She felt Joel's gaze on her like a physical caress, felt the goodwill of the assembled witnesses, felt the rightness of this moment settling into her bones. The ceremony itself was brief, the circuit preacher's words practical rather than flowery. But when Joel took her hand and promised to love and cherish her for the rest of his days, his voice rang with absolute conviction. And when Nora made her own vows, promising partnership and loyalty and love, she meant every word with her whole heart. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher said. "Son, you may kiss your bride." Joel cupped Nora's face in his gentle hands and kissed her thoroughly, earning catcalls and laughter from the assembled crowd. When they turned to face their guests, hands clasped and matching grins on their faces, Nora felt a joy so profound it almost frightened her. This was real. She was married. She had a partner, a home, a future that stretched beyond mere survival. The reception at the general store was simple but joyful, with food and drink, and even some fiddle music provided by one of the ranch hands. People came up to offer congratulations, and while some seemed genuinely happy and others merely curious, Nora found she did not care. The opinions of strangers mattered less than the solid warmth of Joel's hand in hers, the way he kept looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. As evening fell and the guests began to drift away, Joel and Nora slipped out into the cool November night. Joel had hitched up a wagon Rosie was too small to carry both of them and all of Nora's belongings, and he helped her up onto the seat before climbing up beside her. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Sutherland?" he asked, and Nora loved the way her new name sounded in his voice. "Ready," she confirmed. The drive to their little house on the edge of town was quiet, both of them wrapped in the profound contentment of the moment. When they arrived, Joel insisted on carrying Nora over the threshold despite her protests about her weight. He managed it, strong from years of ranch work, setting her down gently in the middle of their front room. "Welcome home," he said softly. That first night together was tender and careful, both of them nervous but eager. Joel treated Nora with a reverence that made her feel beautiful despite every insecurity. He explored her body with gentle hands and patient kisses, learning what made her sigh and what made her gasp. And when they finally came together, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Two people who had been alone too long finally finding their way home. Afterward, wrapped in Joel's arms in their marriage bed, Nora felt tears sliding down her cheeks again. But these were tears of gratitude, of wonder, of joy too big to contain. "What is it?" Joel murmured, kissing her temple. "I did not think this could be real," Nora admitted. "I thought I would spend my whole life alone, that no one would ever want me like this." Joel tightened his arms around her. "I want you like this every day for the rest of my life," he said fiercely. "You are my wife, my partner, my love. I am going to spend the rest of our days making sure you never doubt that again." Their first months of marriage were an adjustment, learning to share space and make decisions together, navigating the practical realities of building a life as a team. Joel continued working at Diamond Creek Ranch, leaving before dawn and returning at dusk, while Nora maintained a reduced laundry business, taking on only her best customers and charging higher rates now that she had help. Joel had insisted she hire assistants, a young woman named Molly from one of Kingman's poorer families who needed work. With Molly handling the heaviest labor, Nora could focus on the detail work she excelled at, and the business actually grew more profitable. For the first time in years, Nora was not utterly exhausted at the end of each day. The extra energy gave her time to make their house into a true home. She sewed curtains and tablecloths, planted herbs in boxes by the windows, learned to cook the dishes Joel loved from his Texas childhood. Joel, in turn, built her a proper indoor washing area with good drainage and a large copper boiler, installed better heating for the winter, and constructed shelves and storage for their growing collection of household goods. They fell into comfortable routines: breakfast together before Joel left for the ranch, dinner by lamplight where they shared the events of their days, quiet evenings spent reading or talking or simply sitting close. The intimacy of it, the profound comfort of no longer being alone, never quite stopped feeling like a miracle to Nora. Winter came to the Arizona high desert with cold winds and occasional snow, turning the landscape stark and beautiful. Nora discovered she loved having a warm house to retreat to, loved the excuse to stay close to Joel when the weather turned bitter. They spent long winter evenings wrapped in blankets, planning for the future. "I have been saving for years," Joel told her one January night. "Between my wages and your laundry business, we should have enough for a down payment on some land by next fall. Not a big spread, but enough to start our own small ranch." "Our own land," Nora marveled. "I never thought I would own property." "We will build it together," Joel promised. "Everything we do from now on, we do as partners." Spring arrived in an explosion of desert wildflowers, and with it came news that made Nora's heart race with joy and terror in equal measure. She was pregnant. The realization came gradually: missed courses, morning sickness, a fullness in her breasts that was new even for her generous figure. When she finally worked up the courage to tell Joel, he swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure delight. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Nora asked, needing to hear it confirmed. Happy does not begin to cover it, Joel said, kneeling in front of her to press his face against her still flat stomach. Thank you, Nora. Thank you for this gift. Pregnancy agreed with Nora in some ways and disagreed in others. The morning sickness was brutal, but once it passed, she felt stronger than ever. Her body, always abundant, seemed made for carrying a child. She bloomed with pregnancy, her skin glowing, her energy surprising even herself. Joel was attentive to the point of hovering, constantly asking if she needed anything, insisting she rest more, recruiting Molly to handle even more of the laundry work. Nora endured his fussing with good humor, touched by his obvious excitement and concern. As summer arrived and Nora's belly swelled with their growing child, Joel made good on his promise. He had found a property 20 miles northwest of Kingman, near Diamond Creek, 40 acres with a natural spring, good grazing, and a small homestead cabin that needed work but was fundamentally sound. The price was more than fair, and with their combined savings, they could just manage the purchase. They rode out to see the land together, Nora riding carefully on Rosie while Joel led them on foot. The property was beautiful in its harsh desert way, with views of distant mountains and the spring feeding a line of cottonwoods that promised shade and water year-round. The cabin was rough but weatherproof, 2 rooms that could be expanded as needed. "What do you think?" Joel asked, anxious for her approval. Nora walked slowly around the property, imagining their life here: cattle grazing, a garden near the spring, children running wild through the open spaces. "I think it is perfect," she said. "I think this is where we are meant to build our future." They closed on the property in August, and Joel immediately set about making improvements. With help from some of the Diamond Creek hands, he repaired the cabin's roof, installed a proper floor, built a small barn for livestock they did not yet own. The work was hard, but Joel thrived on it, energized by the knowledge that he was building something permanent, something for his family. Nora continued working in Kingman through her pregnancy, though she let Molly handle more and more of the physical labor. She used the time to sew baby clothes, to prepare linens and supplies, to ready herself mentally for the enormous change coming to their lives. On a cool October evening, 3 weeks before her due date, Nora felt the first contractions. She was at the washing station behind their Kingman house, supervising Molly's work, when the pain hit a tightening across her belly that took her breath away. "Mrs. Sutherland?" Molly asked, concerned. "Are you all right? Get Joel," Nora managed, "and find Carmen. Tell them the baby is coming." The next hours were a blur of pain and effort. Carmen arrived to coach her through labor, having delivered countless babies in her life. Joel rode in from the ranch wild-eyed and terrified, gripping Nora's hand so hard she thought he might break bones. The doctor came and went, pronouncing everything normal, leaving Nora in Carmen's capable hands. Labor was hard, harder than any work Nora had ever done. But her body, strong from years of physical labor, knew what to do. And when their son finally entered the world in the early morning hours, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Nora felt a love so fierce it transcended anything she had imagined possible. "A boy," Carmen announced, placing the baby in Nora's arms. "A strong, healthy boy." Joel stared at his son with awe, reaching out tentatively to touch the baby's tiny fist. When those impossibly small fingers wrapped around his thumb, tears streamed down his face. "He is perfect," Joel whispered. "Nora, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas, after Joel's father, with the middle name Michael for Nora's father. Little Thomas Sutherland was a good baby, nursing eagerly and sleeping in reasonable stretches, though Nora still found herself exhausted in those early weeks. Joel helped however he could, changing diapers and walking the floor when Thomas fussed, marveling constantly at the miracle they had created. "I never knew I could love something this much," Joel confessed one night, holding his sleeping son. "I thought what I felt for you was the limit of my heart, but it is like my heart grew bigger." "Love does that," Nora said softly. "It expands to fill whatever space it needs." They spent the winter in their Kingman house, giving Nora time to recover, and Thomas time to grow stronger before attempting the move to their land. But with spring came action. Joel hired a wagon to move their belongings, and on a bright April morning when Thomas was 6 months old, they left Kingman behind and headed for their new home. The cabin was small, but Joel had made it comfortable, and Nora threw herself into the work of making it truly theirs. She hung curtains, arranged their few pieces of furniture, set up a cooking area and a sleeping area for Thomas. The work was hard, but it was joyful too, building their future with her own hands. Joel purchased their first cattle that spring, 10 head to start, more than they could really afford but enough to begin building a herd. He worked from dawn to dusk building fences, clearing land, tending the animals. Nora managed the household and cared for Thomas, and in her spare time, she kept a kitchen garden that flourished near the spring. Life was hard, no question. Money was tight, the work endless, the isolation occasionally challenging. But Nora had never been happier. She loved watching Joel come in dusty and tired from a day's work, loved the way his face lit up when he saw her and Thomas. She loved the quiet evenings when they sat outside watching the sunset paint the desert in impossible colors. She loved waking in the middle of the night to nurse Thomas, looking out the window at the vast star-scattered sky and feeling blessed beyond measure. Their second child, a daughter they named Sarah Rose, arrived 2 years after Thomas. Joel had expanded the cabin by then, adding 2 more rooms and a proper porch where they could sit in the evenings. The cattle herd had grown to 30 head, and they were finally turning a modest profit. It was not wealth by any measure, but it was security, stability, a foundation to build on. Sarah was different from Thomas, more demanding, louder, fiercer. She entered the world howling and continued at that volume for most of her first year. But she was also affectionate and funny, and Joel absolutely doted on his daughter. Watching him with Sarah, so patient and gentle with her tantrums, made Nora fall in love with him all over again. The years rolled by in a pattern of work and growth. Joel built a bigger barn, expanded the herd, added chickens and pigs. Nora kept her garden and managed the household. And when Thomas started getting old enough for school, she taught him his letters herself, determined that her children would have education even in their remote location. They faced hardships, a drought one year that nearly broke them, Thomas falling seriously ill with a fever that terrified them both, a bad winter that killed 3 of their cattle. But they faced everything together, and somehow that made even the worst times bearable. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Joel took Nora's hand and led her away from the cabin, up to a rise that overlooked their property. Their land had grown to 100 acres now, dotted with cattle bearing their brand. The cabin had been expanded into a comfortable house. Fences marked their boundaries, and a small bunkhouse stood ready for the hands they would need to hire eventually. "Look at what we built," Joel said, his arm around Nora's waist. "From nothing but hope and hard work, look at what we created." Nora surveyed their kingdom, modest by some standards, but precious beyond measure to them. Thomas and Sarah were playing in the yard below, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The sun was setting over the distant mountains, painting everything gold. And beside her stood the man who had ridden into her life with his dirty laundry and his gentle heart, who had seen her worth when she could barely see it herself. "I never imagined this," Nora said honestly. "When I was washing clothes by the river, alone and convinced I would always be alone, I never let myself dream of something like this." "I did," Joel admitted. "From the moment I saw you, stubborn and strong and surviving against all odds, I knew I wanted to build a life with you. I just had to convince you to want it too." "That did not take much convincing," Nora said, smiling. "You brought me bread and peach preserves, and I was lost." Joel laughed, the sound warm and familiar. "It was your strength that drew me in, but it was your heart that made me stay." "You are the best person I know, Nora Sutherland. You make me want to be better, do better, build something worthy of you." "You already have," Nora said, gesturing at the life they had created. "This is more than I ever thought possible." They stood together on that rise as the stars began to emerge, holding each other close while their children played and their cattle grazed and their home waited below. It was not a perfect life. There were still hard days, still struggles and setbacks and moments of doubt. But it was a good life, a life built on love and partnership and the stubborn determination to create something lasting. 3 more children followed Sarah, another son named James, then twin girls, Emily and Grace. The house expanded again to accommodate them all, growing from a small cabin into a sprawling ranch house with 6 bedrooms and a big kitchen where the whole family gathered for meals. Joel hired on 2 full-time hands to help with the growing herd, and Nora found herself managing a household that often included not just her family but the ranch workers as well. The work never really ended, but Nora found she did not mind. She loved the busy chaos of her full house, loved watching her children grow and learn and develop their own personalities. Thomas grew tall and serious like his father, already showing skill with horses and cattle. Sarah was wild and fearless, more likely to be found climbing trees than helping with domestic chores. James was gentle and thoughtful, content to spend hours helping Nora in the garden. And the twins, born when Nora was 38, were identical mischief makers who kept everyone on their toes. Joel thrived as both rancher and father. He had a gift for the work, a deep understanding of land and animals that translated into steady success. The Diamond Creek Ranch, as they had named their spread, became known throughout Mohave County for quality cattle and honest dealing. Joel's reputation brought opportunities, contracts with the Army Fort, sales to eastern markets, offers to expand and diversify. But Joel never let success change his essential nature. He remained the same gentle, hard-working man who had shown up at the river with his laundry and his heart. He still looked at Nora with the same love and appreciation, still made time to sit with her on the porch after the children were in bed, still partnered with her on every decision affecting their family. On quiet nights, when the house was finally settled and they could steal a few moments alone, Joel would sometimes pull Nora close and marvel at how far they had come. "Remember when you were just the laundress by the river," he would say, "and I was just a drifting cowboy with nothing to his name." "We were never just anything," Nora would reply. "We were always who we needed to be." As their children grew and began to leave home, Thomas joining his father in running the ranch, Sarah marrying a rancher's son from up north, James heading to Prescott to study animal husbandry, the twins still young but dreaming their own dreams, Nora and Joel found themselves coming full circle. Once again, they were often alone together, the house quiet after years of chaos. But this time, the solitude was sweet rather than lonely. They had built something lasting, something that would outlive them both. They had children who were strong and capable, grandchildren starting to arrive, a legacy of hard work and love that would continue for generations. On the morning of their 25th anniversary, Joel woke Nora before dawn and led her down to the small river that ran through their property, fed by the spring that had drawn them to the land all those years ago. There, in the growing light, he had set up a small table with coffee and fresh bread, blankets spread on the riverbank, a simple celebration of where they had begun. 25 years ago, you were washing laundry by a river, Joel said, pouring coffee into tin cups. And I was looking for someone to clean my clothes. Seems fitting to celebrate here, where water runs clean and new every day, just like our love. Nora laughed at the poetry, at the sweet sentimentality that Joel had never lost despite decades of hard ranching. "That is terrible," she said affectionately. "You are terrible at romance." "And yet you married me anyway," Joel pointed out, grinning. "Best decision I ever made," Nora said, meaning it absolutely. They sat by the river as the sun rose, talking about their years together, about all they had survived and built and accomplished. They talked about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch's future, about their own aging bodies and what might come next. But mostly they just sat together, comfortable in the silence that came from decades of partnership, content in the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. "Thank you," Joel said eventually, taking Nora's hand in his worn, scarred one. "Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy with dirty laundry and too much hope." "Thank you for seeing me," Nora replied, her own hand equally marked by time and work. "Thank you for loving me when I did not know how to love myself." "Easiest thing I ever did," Joel said softly. "You made it easy just by being who you are." The sun climbed higher, warming the desert around them, and Nora thought about the young woman she had been alone, frightened, resigned to a life of solitary labor. That woman would not recognize the life Nora had built, would not believe that happiness like this was possible. But it was possible. Joel had proven it, riding into her life with his simple need and his open heart. He had seen past her size and her circumstances to the woman beneath, and in seeing her, he had given her permission to see herself. Together, they had built not just a ranch but a family, not just a living but a life. Years continued to pass, bringing the inevitable changes of age. Joel's joints grew stiff from decades of ranch work, and Nora's hands ached with arthritis from all those years of washing. But they aged together, adjusting their work to their capabilities, relying more on their children and grandchildren while still maintaining oversight of everything they had built. Thomas took over primary management of the ranch, proving to be as capable as his father. Sarah returned after her husband died, bringing her 3 children to help on the family land. James came back from his studies with new ideas about breeding and management that improved the herd's quality. And the twins, now young women in their 20s, ran the household with the same efficiency their mother had taught them. Nora and Joel became the heart of the family, the center everyone returned to. Their house was always full of children and grandchildren, noise and laughter and the beautiful chaos of a family that loved well. And through it all, at the center of everything, was the partnership they had forged by that river so many years ago. On a spring evening when Nora was 62 and Joel 65, they sat on their porch watching another Arizona sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. Thomas was out checking cattle with his own son. Sarah was cooking dinner for the extended family that would soon gather around their large table. James was in the barn, tending to a sick calf. The twins were somewhere causing trouble, as they always did. "Not bad for an obese laundress and a drifting cowboy," Nora said, surveying their kingdom with satisfaction. Joel took her hand, his grip still strong despite the passage of time. "Best partnership I ever entered into," he said. "You and me, Nora, we built something real." "We did," Nora agreed. Against all odds, we really did. Inside, the dinner bell rang, calling the family to gather. Joel helped Nora to her feet. Both of them moved slower now. But they moved together, and they walked into the house they had built, surrounded by the family they had created, secure in the love they had nurtured for more than 3 decades. That night, after the dishes were washed and the grandchildren put to bed, after their children had departed to their own homes or rooms, Nora and Joel lay together in the bed they had shared for so many years. Outside, the desert night was vast and star-filled. Inside, everything was warm and safe. "I love you," Joel said, as he had said thousands of times before and would say thousands of times more. "Still, always, forever." "I love you too," Nora replied, the words as true now as they had been the first time she had spoken them. "You gave me a life I never thought possible." "We gave each other that," Joel corrected gently. "That is what partnership means." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something lasting. The river that had brought them together still ran through their land, constant and pure. The cattle they had raised together grazed under the stars. Their children and grandchildren slept safely under roofs they had built with their own hands and endless love. It was not a fairy tale ending, because fairy tales were not real. This was better a real ending, earned through hard work and dedication, and the stubborn refusal to give up on each other even when times got hard. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely beautiful, like all real love stories are. And every time Joel looked at Nora, even decades after that first meeting by the river, he still saw the same woman, strong, capable, worthy of every good thing life could offer. And every time Nora looked at Joel, she still felt that flutter of gratitude and wonder that this good man had chosen her, had loved her, had partnered with her to build something remarkable. The years would continue to pass, bringing more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren, bringing losses and challenges but also joys and triumphs. But through it all, Nora and Joel would remain at the center, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They had started with nothing but hope and a bundle of dirty laundry, and they had created a legacy that would last for generations. And on quiet evenings, when the house was finally peaceful and they could steal a moment alone, they would sometimes walk down to the river that ran through their property. There, standing where water ran eternally clean and new, they would remember the beginning, a lonely laundress, a gentle cowboy, and the simple kindness that had changed everything. It was a good story, their story. Not perfect but real. Not easy but worth it. Not what either of them had expected, but exactly what they both had needed. And as the Arizona stars wheeled overhead and the river sang its eternal song, Nora and Joel would hold hands and count themselves blessed beyond measure. Two solitary souls who had found each other and built something that would outlast them both, a family, a home, a love that transcended circumstance, and proved that even the loneliest people can find their way to belonging, if they are brave enough to take the risk. Their story ended not with a single moment but with a lifetime of moments, each one built on the foundation of that first meeting by the river. It ended with children grown and grandchildren growing, with land worked and improved, with cattle branded and sold, with meals shared and laughter ringing through rooms built by love and determination. It ended with two old people, still holding hands, still partners, still in love after more than 40 years together, still looking at each other with the same wonder and gratitude that had marked their beginning. And that, in the end, was the only ending that mattered, not dramatic, not extraordinary, just real and lasting and absolutely enough. The obese laundress who had worked alone by the river had found her cowboy, and he had brought not just his washing but his whole heart. And together, they had created something beautiful.